I'm going to be talking about low or no money down models for investing in real estate, specifically answering the question, if I'm not a gazillionaire or didn't start with a bunch of money, didn't inherit a bunch of money, and I'm not a Kardashian, how can I start investing in real estate if I don't have a whole lot of money? All right. And that's the question I want to answer today. And I want to help give you some guidance on that. And so, again, I'm a real estate investor and an investing coach. And my goal is to give you tools to be able to learn how to capitalize on what's coming in the market. I'll talk a little bit about what's coming in the market. But while I'm doing this, feel free to add comments in whatever platform you're on, and I'll be able to see the comments that are coming in. And I'll do my best to address them at some point if I'm able. So, yeah, so let's just jump in. Let's talk about investing even if you're not rich. So how do you get a cash flowing property? So this is a property that produces passive income. How do you do that if you don't have 20% down on a $200,000 property? You've got to come to close with $45,000, right? And in order to do that, in order to meet your goal, you need 10, 15, 20 houses. That means you've got to come to the table with a lot of money. This model is designed to help you avoid that challenge. And so before I jump into the model and the nitty gritty of it, I want to talk about why it's important. Because long term, if you're in this group or you're focusing on it, you're watching this, it's because you care about passive income. It's because your goal is to generate cash flow that comes in even when you're not working on it. So that you can live the life that you want, so that you can do what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to do it, with whom you want to do it, and from where you want to do it. You want to have freedom. And wealth is a way toward that freedom. Wealth is really the ability to choose. It gives you options. So when you have social wealth, you get to choose who you spend time with. And when you have the wealth of time, you get to choose how you spend your time. And when you have wealth of money, you get to choose how you spend your money and how you employ that money to work for you. And so that's the big picture why. Everyone's why is different though. My why is different than your why is different than the next person's why. I want you to think about that though. What is your why? Is what your purpose for having passive income? Is it protection from future economic downturns? And if it is protection, why? Why do you care about that? Maybe it's because you want to spend time with your family. You want to spend more time with your kids, or you want to spend more time with your spouse, or be a better husband or father, or steward the money that you've been given in your family better than, say, your parents or your grandparents might have. For us, my wife and I wanted to achieve financial freedom so that we could do whatever we wanted for the community. We could identify in our community, we live in East Texas, we could identify in our community, what do they need? And then ask the question, are we the right people to do it? Right? Are we the right people to provide this need? Okay? And that's what we do. In fact, my wife has a for-profit business with a nonprofit's heart that provides classical ballet instruction to all girls, regardless of economic status. And that's one of the things that we're really passionate about is being able to look at our community and say, what does our community need, and how can we provide for them? So your why might look a lot different than that. It might be, in fact, I talked to a guy the other day who wants to teach dyslexia therapy. That's all he wants to do. He just wants to teach kids how to read that are struggling through dyslexia. I've got other people that want to generate generational wealth for their kids and provide for their kids and take from what maybe their parent inherited or gave to them upon their passing so that they can multiply that and take care of their kids generationally. So your why may be completely different. And those are kind of some of the larger reason whys. I want to talk about a few more short-term related whys. Why you would want to do this and why you'd want to learn about models that allow you no or low money down. And first is if you've got these big grand visions of passive income and cash flow that exceeds your expenses so you can do whatever you want with your time, you've got to start somewhere. And now's as good a time to start as any. So you've got to start somewhere. And the way that you do that isn't by saying, well, I'm not rich. It's not by saying, I'm not independently wealthy. I didn't inherit a bunch of money. I'm aware that it takes money to make money and I don't have money, right? It doesn't come with excuses. What it comes with is an ability to understand what your constraints are and then identify solutions for those constraints. So now is the right time to start. When people say, when's the best time to start in real estate, start investing in real estate? The answer is always now. You just have to figure out how. And if you don't have a whole lot of money to start, perfect. You can still get started. If you've got a couple $100,000, you might be able to scale a little bit more simply, and you might be able to trade off some of your time and get some of your time back and do a buy and hold strategy or something like that. But I want to talk specifically about low or no money down models. So that's the first short-term reason that I think it's important to learn this right now. That you got to start somewhere, right? The second is COVID related. COVID has brought straight into our face the awareness of a need to provide for your family through multiple income streams. You should have multiple income streams coming in. This can be done in a lot of different ways. It could be done with a multi-level marketing organization. It could be done with an Etsy shop. It could be done with a bakery. Whatever. It could be done a bunch of different ways. Amazon affiliates, e-commerce is a great example. But you need multiple different income streams coming in. And because what we've seen with COVID is a lot of people have been adversely affected and been their whole career has been completely changed because COVID has changed their market, right? Maybe they're unemployed and the future of their employment looks completely different than it did in the past. We need to be able to protect ourselves and have multiple income streams coming in to protect ourselves in situations like that. And then third, so that's second. Third is related to COVID is there is a foreclosure tidal wave coming. And you might think that tidal wave is an incendiary term to use, but don't take it from me. I wrote an article on this about 3 or 4 months ago that there was a foreclosure tidal wave coming. But even now, you've got the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, advising mortgage lenders that they're using the term tidal wave. You can go look it up. As recently as last month, they started advising people, the mortgage lenders, that we are in for a tidal wave of foreclosures. Right now, there are upwards of 3.7 million people behind on their mortgage payments. And the foreclosure moratorium has been extended through June 30th. And with the way that the country is rebounding because we've exceeded 100 million vaccine doses and we're starting to see daily counts come down even below 50,000 COVID new cases a day, I don't expect that to be pushed. Now, it could be pushed, it could be extended, but I would be surprised if that happened. And what that means is that there is going to be a tidal wave of under market properties entering the market, right? So right now and in the months previously, let's say up till really even October of last year, is difficult to find properties. And the challenge with finding properties right now is different than the challenge of finding properties in the future. Properties are going to end up in the future, probably around the June 30th timeframe, becoming a lot more easily found. And that's important because right now the real estate market is hot. It's expensive. Prices are artificially inflated. And the reason for that is that inventory has sank. And so basic microeconomics would tell us that supply and demand determine market equilibrium or the price of a good or service. And when supply, our inventory for houses, on market and off market, when it drops, but demand stays about the same, which is what's happened generally across the United States. I'm not talking about places like Austin, Texas, or maybe even Nashville, Portland. Places like that are kind of in a really interesting circumstance, but most places, demand has just slightly dropped, and that's caused prices to artificially inflate. So, whenever these foreclosures hit, these 3.7 million houses that are behind, only, I want to say 2.7 of them are on forbearance plans. And some of those people may still enter into their mortgage payments and realize my financial position has changed indefinitely and we can't afford this house anymore. They'll either have to put it on the market or sell off market through, say, a wholesaler to allow them to expedite the process of selling it and close faster so that they don't get foreclosed on. Those properties joining the market are going to cause prices to come down because supply will be increased. Demand will probably tick back up, but supply will be increased. And what I want to do, why I think it's important for us to talk about this today, is so that when that happens, you're prepared with the knowledge to be able to capitalize on it. Right? I was just talking to a gentleman named Rick a couple days ago about what happened in 08, 09. And while what we're experiencing now is fundamentally different, it's a different effect on the market than 08, 09, which was a systematic failure of the way that we offered notes and mortgages. What he said was the people with money that knew how to invest after 08, 09, when the housing prices plummeted, he said they were shopping around like they were in a candy store. And what I want for you is to be able to go take advantage of this situation and capture the opportunity. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I teach people, because I want to help people get to the point where they're completely financially free. They're able to build their own portfolio that produces cash flowing properties. Okay, so those are the near term things that I think are really important. And so with that, let's jump into talking about some of these lower no money down models, because there's multiple of them. There's my favorite one, which we're going to talk about. There's a thing called subject to financing. There's seller financing. There's a number of different ones, but my favorite model, in fact, I'll tell you the name later. Some of you might already know the name, but in my experience, the name of this model tends to convolute the understanding of the process if you're early on in this. So I'll explain to you my favorite model. Okay. And the goal here is to be able to get a house that cash flows with low or no money down. And I'll add a little caveat. Cash flowing real estate is a specific kind of real estate, and it is determined by the market. So there are places like, for example, I mentioned Austin, Texas. Used to be a cash flow market. Now it's not. It's not oriented for cash flow. So markets are either cash flow markets, appreciation markets, or neither. And so you've got to decide the way that you're going to invest. Okay, if you try and invest in a market that's not a cash flow market, it's going to present challenges for you. And I always say that market selection is a gating factor, right? It's a gating factor in the fact that if you pick the wrong one, you pick a market that doesn't cash flow, you could be the absolute most brilliant real estate investor in understanding cash flow analytics and cash flow deal analysis and still not be able to find deals. On the conversely, you could really have a pretty rudimental understanding, a simple understanding of real estate. And if you pick the right market, it's going to be very easy. An example I used to a friend earlier this week was, if you're going to look for baby clothes, if you're trying to find clothes for your child and you go to Home Depot, what are the chances that you're going to find baby clothes? Maybe you could find something. Maybe they've got like some tarps. They've probably got some workman's gloves, maybe some mini overalls or things like that. But you might be able to find something that works, but it's going to be much more difficult for you, as opposed to going to a place like Target or Babies R Us. You might not have, you don't even have to know what type of clothes you're looking for your kiddo, right? You just go in there and there's a bunch of them. That's the same thing with markets. Markets is the exact same thing. Okay. It's a gating factor. If you pick the wrong market, you're up a creek without a paddle. Okay. Unless you bought 15 or 20 years ago. And if you're starting right now, I haven't figured out how to time travel yet. If I do, maybe I'll do a webinar or a live cast on that as well. But at this point, that's nil. Okay. So let me tell you about my favorite model. My favorite model, and I'll tell you the name later again. It's best for a few different things. One, it provides cash flow. Two, the price of entry is more reasonable. So the actual money out of your pocket, or even the money to purchase a house, is lower. It's more realistic for people that aren't independently wealthy. And three, it's scalable, which is an important thing, because what we're trying to do is build passive income scalably. Okay. So what this model allows you to do, it allows you to get into a cash flowing house. Again, assuming that we're in the right market. It allows you to get into a cash flowing house for low or no money down, as little as zero money out of your own pocket if you do it right. Okay. Some of you are probably like, this doesn't make sense. I don't believe that. But let me walk you through it. The way that I'm going to do it is, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to synthesize a couple different stories. Okay. First, there are two famous models, most famous models of real estate in the United States. One is flipping, right? Chip and Joanna Gaines, or HGTV. One's flipping. The other is called turnkey, or buy and hold, where you show up with 20% down and you just rent the property out, right? Both of them have value. Flipping, on one hand, is fantastic in that you can scale really quickly. For example, let's say you were to buy a house that you know is worth $200,000, but it's listed for 80. It's listed for $80,000, and it only really needs $20,000 worth of work. But because cosmetically it's really ugly, and because maybe it's got some foundation issues, everybody's scared away from it. But you know it's worth $200,000. So you borrow $80,000 for the purchase, you borrow $20,000 for the rehab, then it's worth now $200,000. What a flipper does is they go out to the market and they say, buy my house. and someone will buy that house for at or near market value, and then they take the cash, the $100,000 less closing costs and taxes, and they feed their family or they take them on a trip. Average flip in the United States, the value of it, the take home is $60,000. That's pretty good money. So what it has is an ability to scale, but what it doesn't have is it lacks the ability to create passive income, because that income is, I could understand people arguing between it being earned income and portfolio income. So there's three types of incomes: earned income, portfolio income, and passive income. I could see you arguing between the two on flipping, but for all intents and purposes, you've still got to go hunt and find another deal. After you're done with that flip, you've got to go find another one in order to continue to feed your family. So it doesn't provide passive income, but there is a scalability that's really attractive there. Okay, the other model, so that's flipping, that's the Chip and Joanna Gaineses of the world. The other model is buy and hold, or turnkey, as some people will call it. The reason that they call it turnkey is because the property's in good shape. It's a turnkey investment. You don't have to do anything to it. You just pay for it and you leave. All right, and that's nice. The simplicity is really nice. But what it costs is 20% down. So if we're buying that $200,000 house that we just talked about, and we got to show up with 20% down, we've got to come to the table with $20,000 plus closing costs. So many or 20% times the $200,000, so $40,000 plus closing costs. So that's $43,000 to $45,000, right? Your ability to do that relies heavily on your spending patterns and how much money you make, right? Or maybe if you've got some money that you've inherited or whatever that you came into. But if you're not independently wealthy in that scenario, it's really difficult to scale. So what it does provide is passive income. You just buy a house, assuming it's the right market. You buy a house, you put 20% down, and then you rent it out for more than what your mortgage payment is. And so if your mortgage payment is $800 and you're renting it out for $1,500, you've got some expenses in there. Maybe you walk away with $400 a month in your pocket after you've saved for expenses or paid expenses, right? But what it costs you is $45,000 to make that $400 a month. That's not a great return. Most turnkey investors are looking for anywhere between 8 to 20% cash on cash return. And cash on cash return answers the question of the money that I invest into this property, how much will I get back in 12 months? So if you invested $10,000 in a property and you make $10,000 back that year, that's 100% cash on cash return, which, using the model that I'm talking about, is not abnormal. But it is abnormal for a model like turnkey. Because what turnkey has going for it is that it creates passive income. But where it fails in our goals of scalable passive income is that it's not scalable. You have to then go find another 50 grand or 45 grand in order to find this next house or get into it. And so what this model does is it synthesizes the two. So let me explain this for you. So let's say that we start out buying a house like we're going to flip it. And let's say that this house is worth $100,000 if we know it's in good shape. If the house is in really good shape, it's worth $100,000. But it's on the market for $50,000, which is fantastic. Maybe you found it through a wholesaler, someone posted on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, LoopNet, or whatever. You found this property at $50,000, and you know it's only going to take $20,000 to fix up. Right? That means that you're all in at $70,000, and you've got a $100,000 house. Right? So you own $30,000 of it. Now that's in equity in the house. It's not as liquid as your savings account or your checking account, but it is your money, and there are ways to access it. One of the ways is, like a flipper would do, is to sell the property. Another way to access the equity in your house would be a home equity line of credit. But there are multiple ways to access that money. So imagine that we bought that house, and let's say we did what a flipper did. We don't have $70,000 to begin with. So we take that $50,000 purchase price and the $20,000 rehab, and we borrow it from a private lender. Now, some of you might be saying, well, borrowing it from a private lender, that's hard. Private lending is what I consider the secret sauce of investing. You've got to find someone to loan you the money. The nice part about probably all of the people listening right now, whatever platform you're on, is that you are probably living in the United States. And the luxury that we have as United States citizens is that our economy makes up almost a quarter of economic activity globally. So almost 25% of global GDP, or gross domestic product, is created in the United States, which means there is a lot of money in the United States. We live in the wealthiest generation in the history of the world. So there is money out there. You just have to go find it. You've got to go find where that money is. And I'm telling you, you can do it. It is findable. I funded my very first property. I had no examples of having invested in real estate. I funded my very first property with private money. 100% of the rehab, 100% of the purchase price. That's very doable. Okay? So don't give me any excuses on that front. You can do it. You just got to put in the hustle to do it. Okay? So let's say that you take that $70,000 that's loaned to you from somebody, from some private lender or a hard money lender, maybe. That $70,000 gets you into the house. So you now buy the house and you fix it up. You have a contractor do that work because your goal is passive income. You've still got your 9 to 5 if you're still in a W-2 or a 1099, and you have somebody else fix that property up. At the end of that, it's worth $100,000, but you're only $70,000 in, right? So you own that $30,000. What a flipper would do is they would go to the market, they'd put it on the MLS, and they would sell it. All right, so they would sell it. They would walk away with $30,000, right? So you've got the $50,000 purchase price, the $20,000 rehab, and then the $30,000 between that and what the sale price is, right? So they'd have some costs. They've got capital gains to deal with for taxes, and then they've got some listing fees, closing costs. So let's say they walk away with $25,000. That's a pretty good deal, right? What this model says is instead of selling that property, we want to use that equity in the house. So we're going to use that equity in the house. So you're going to go to a bank, a lender, a mortgage lender, and you're going to say, "Hey, I want to refinance my note." So you've got a note from somebody on a short-term loan, interest-only loan on this property for $70,000. You're going to bring that note to the bank and say, "I'd like to refinance this note." And the bank is going to say, "Well, we can only loan up to a certain value of the property." Because banks, a common misconception is banks don't care about 20% down. They don't care how much you put down. What they care about is how much they can lend on the asset, right? They do this to hedge their risk, right? So that what they usually say, most lenders for conventional loan will lend up to 80% LTV, loan to value. So 80% of the value of the house is what they'll loan you. So if you've got a $100,000 house, they'll loan you up to $80,000 for it. So if you don't have $80,000 or you don't have all $100,000 for this property, but you do have $20,000, you can come put 20% down and get this house, right? But if you don't have $20,000, they say, "Well, we can only loan you up to $80,000. And this is the same for houses all over the place. Now, what I'm not talking about live-in loans. So primary residence loans, you've got, in fact, I was talking to the lender today that does 0% down, right? And his rate was awesome. I think it was like 3.75 or 4 for 0% down loan for a 30-year amortized product. That's a fantastic loan. So there are programs out there if you're going to live in the house. What I'm talking about is investment properties, okay? An investment property. So a bank really only cares about the loan to value, right? And what they're doing here is they're hedging their risk. Think about in 08, 09, when the market tanked. Overall, across the United States, housing prices dropped 33%. That's a lot, right? And so what happened was mortgage lenders who had lent, sometimes with 0% down or 5% down, they were underwater. Now the houses weren't worth even what the mortgage was owed on it. Now the nice part is since then, not only has the United States recovered that 33% of value in homes, but it's also grown 50%. So we're talking 83% growth over the last 12, 13 years since that downturn. That's a big deal. That's fantastic. Okay, so but what they're trying to do is they've looked at 2008, 2009. They've understood their weaknesses and the systemic failures that plagued the mortgage industry, the lending industry at that point. And they've said, we're comfortable with a 20% buffer. We'll loan you up to 80% of it because of the value of the property, because we think worst case scenario, if the market tanks, it'll probably only tank about 20%, and then we're still right side up. We can still get our money back, right? We could foreclose on it. We could sell it at market value, okay? So that's really all they care about is 80%. So if you were to go to them as a buy and hold investor and you said, "I want to buy this $100,000 house," they'd say, "Okay, give me $20,000 for your 20%, and then we'll fund the 80%, all right? But now let's go back to our example, okay? We flipped the house, but we haven't sold it yet. We flipped the house. We bought it for 50. We put 20 into it, and now it's worth 100. So we owe $70,000 to our lender, plus a little bit of interest, but we have $30,000 to work with. And we go to the bank and we say, I want to refinance my note. And they say, well, we can only lend you up to 80% of the value of the house. So now you've got $80,000 to work with, all right? But you owe $70,000. So you use $70,000 to pay off that original loan, which was a short-term interest-only loan. And now what you do is now the bank owns your note and they say, we're going to convert this into a long-term mortgage. We're going to take this $70,000 loan and we're going to stretch it out over 30 years at 3.5% or 4%. So what that does is, one, it allows your monthly payments to be paying toward principal as well instead of just interest. And two, it allows you to lower your payment, which then allows you to cash flow more on the property. Because now that we've got it fixed up, we're going to rent that house out. Average house like that, cash flowing for the metrics I'm looking for, would rent for $1,500. Anywhere from $1,300 to $1,500. So you bring this over to the bank now refinances your note, and you're still renting this house out, but you're only paying $450 a month, maybe $500 a month on this house that you're renting out for $1,300 a month. And now, so one of the things you might be wondering is, well, don't you have a loan on that house? Yes, you do. You do have a loan on that house. But one, that debt is not bad debt. There's a difference between good debt and bad debt. Good debt, or let's start with bad debt. Bad debt is predicated on a liability. That bad debt, liabilities are things that take money out of your pockets. Okay, so things like a car, a new boat, even to a certain extent food, right? Or a lot of others, anything that takes money out of your pocket. If it puts money into your pocket, it's an asset. Okay? So if, let's say you run a business and you're able to just kind of like let it run, that puts money into your pocket. So if you were to take out debt on that, that would be a good investment because it's predicated on an asset. The same way with houses. So yes, you do have a mortgage on this house, but someone else is paying for it because someone's paying $1,500 a month. And every month you take a little bit of that and you set it away for things like vacancy and maintenance and capital expenses. So if your roof got a bunch of hail hit it, or your HVAC went out, or you had foundation issues, you saved for those capital expenses, right? You pay for a property manager so that you don't have to touch it. For my portfolio, once it's up and running, once it's good to go and my properties are successfully rehabbed and rented out, I don't look at my portfolio more than 30 minutes a month. That's all. That money just comes in. And so you take that property, that $70,000 note, you convert it into a mortgage. Now you've got that mortgage and you're probably paying $500 a month, while someone else pays down your equity and you take home about $400 a month. Bottom line, this is spending money. Okay, so $400 a month per property. Let's say you've just got 10 properties. That's $4,000 a month. And not only is it $4,000 a month, but it's $4,000 a month tax-free. Because, and we can talk about that another time, I'll do another session on that, but it's tax-free because of the way that the IRS views real estate and incentivizes people to invest in real estate. Because the GDP that I talked about previously, the gross domestic product, a measure of economic activity in a market, that GDP for the United States trails really closely to the real estate market. And so what the IRS wants to do is incentivize, what the federal government wants to do is incentivize people buying homes. First-time home buyers, for example. That's why there are programs for first-time home buyers, FHA loans or VA loans. The reason for that is because real estate is good for the economy. Okay? Now, so when you synthesize those two models, the flipping and the buy and hold, you get the best of both worlds. You get the scalability with the cash flow. And the scalability comes from once you refinance that note, they pay off your lender and now you just have a mortgage. But your lender now just got their money back at 12% return. It's a great return, right? It's low risk because it's asset secured. They've got a lien on your property and high liquidity, and they got a moderately high interest rate on their money. So what they're going to do is turn back around to you and say, go find another property. Go find another property. I'll loan this money to you again. So you can recycle it. And so I go through that entire process to tell you what it is so that the name doesn't mess with you. So the name is the BRRRR model. The BRRRR model stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. Okay, so the entire process I just explained is the BRRRR model. I've had some people say, well, is it because it only works in cold environments because it's cold and people say BRRRR, and that's not the case. The BRRRR, it's an acronym. It stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. That's the process that you go through. And the repeat is recycling that money. It's recycling the money from your private lender into another property. And you're able to just continue to do this. So imagine a world where you could finish a rehab in 4 weeks and then it takes 30 days to refinance. Let's expand that even 3 months. Let's say it takes 3 months per property. You refinance, you get your private money back to the lender, it's all rented out, and then you get another house. I think once you know how to do this, it's very reasonable to get a house every 3 months, which means you can get 4 houses a year. 4 houses by $400 bottom line per house is $1,600 a month, tax free. That's a lot of money. You continue to do that, and it scales to 5, 10, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You look at Grant Cardone; he's got thousands of units that just churn off money every single month, and that's a significant deal. It's a huge deal because not only can it scale, but it provides passive income. And that allows you to do what we were talking about earlier, your why, right? Your reason for doing this, whether you want to spend more time with your kids or you want to travel more. My wife and I are talking right now. We love the small town that we live in East Texas, Tyler, Texas, but I want to go spend a month in Europe. I want to go hop around to a bunch of different places. And so I've convinced her on 2 weeks, but I want to do a month. And that's because that sounds awesome. And it sounds great to be immersed in those cultures. And I can still coach people from all over the place, right? I want you guys to have that freedom as well. I want you to have the passive income coming in the way that you want it to. And so it's a fantastic model. It's my favorite model. It's scalable. It's perfect for people that are just starting and don't have money just piled up. Okay. Now, if you've got a bunch of money sitting around, there may be a better model for you. There's no one model that is perfect for everybody or that is right, that everybody should use. Everybody's situation is a little bit different, but the BRRRR model is a great place to start. If you find yourself in that camp where you lean toward, well, I don't have a bunch of money. I'm not sitting on a pile of money. Some people even get their first investment property using the BRRRR method before before they paid off their student loans or before they own their own home. And that's fine. It can be a really good decision depending on your circumstance. So if it would be helpful for us to talk about that, feel free to message me. I'm happy to give you some advice and direction, especially once I know your goals a little bit better. But what I want for you to be able to do is using this knowledge is what I want you to be able to do is know what's coming in the market. This whole foreclosure situation, the tidal wave of foreclosures is coming. What I want you to be able to do is capitalize on that so that you can be the kid in the candy store going and shopping. And when you look back, you can say, COVID, it had a lot of adverse effects on people in the market, but that year was when I started. And when I started this, okay, that's what I want for you. And so I want you to get to the point where, for me, I was able to retire at 32. I built a multi-million-dollar portfolio in 18 months using this model. It's doable. I didn't come from money, so it's doable. Don't give yourself any excuses to jump out of the way and say, that's not for me, that's just for other people. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's inspired you and encouraged you to keep moving. I look forward to talking to you guys next week when we do another session like this. If you're interested in hearing about something specific or you want to learn about something specific, I'm happy to put together content. I love talking about this stuff. So feel free to comment or send me a message, or I may even put up a poll at some point for you guys to let me know what would be most beneficial for you. All right, I hope this helps. Talk to you soon.